Okay, so chapter 13 on modules, we're going to do that now. The intro to graded assignment 2 will actually be separate later after studio. Okay, so let's talk about modules. We'll talk about the concept, some of the terminology involved around modules and packages and things like that. What you do to import or import a single item from a file, and then what happens if you have multiple items that you want to export and import. And actually, when we get done after that, after the break, I'm going to also do a demo for you with a little program we're going to do to translate Morse code to give you a little bit more of an idea of how that would work. Okay, so the concept of modules, the idea is that you want to organize your files because you can imagine a big application, millions of lines of code potentially, but even thousands. You wouldn't want to have that, in one file. You can separate things out so that it's, organized, first of all, kind of separate like things with like things and, have some categories and things like that. It makes it a lot easier to navigate. You can find what you're looking for. And it's also makes it possible for some of your code to be reusable in other parts of your application. You can, put some folders like common or utils or things like that. It's very, very common to do that, where you put a lot of the things that everyone can use, like rounding and getting random, indexes and formatting your text a certain way, so it can be done consistently everywhere, things like that. So modules can also be shareable, so other people could use it even outside that application. So some of the terminology here, we have module, package, library, dependency. What's the difference, right? So a module is a single file that has exported code. That's it. A package is a group of modules, or it could be even a group of smaller packages that have modules, included in them. And we use the term library generally just to talk about reusable code. It could have, packages with other packages with lots of modules, or it could be very small and simple. But the idea is it's been published by somebody out there specifically so that other people can take advantage of it. And of course, we use the term dependency when we're talking about a library or a package that has been installed as part of your application so that you are making use of it at that point. That's what we call a dependency. Okay. So import and export are the two terms that we're going to use to talk about this process. You have to export data and functions and anything you want to be available from the place where they're defined, and that will make them accessible to other files, but you have to explicitly export them. And then on the other side of that, if you need something, you have to explicitly import it. So it's a dual thing. You can't have one without the other. All right, so I'm going to talk about how to export, import a single item where you really only have one thing that's needed out of that file. And so there's a very simple syntax for this. So you can just point to it directly. And what you want to do is set module.exports at the bottom of your file, and then just assign the value of whatever it is that you want to do. And it's essentially just making it an anonymous export. And that means on the other side of this, when we go to import it, you can call it anything you want because it's the only thing that is, exported by default here. And you generally, module.export should just be the last thing in the file so that it can grab anything that's defined above it. So in this example, we've got a function, get full name. You give it a first name, you give it a last name, it returns it formatted with a space in between, right? Very simple little formatting thing. I can export that directly, and all I have to do is just say module.exports equals, and then just reference get full name. Notice I'm not calling it, I'm just giving the name. I'm referencing that and saying this is the item that when you go to import something from this file, this is exactly what you get, just this one thing. Okay, so let's remember that. We've got get full name, right, as what we got. So on the import side, yeah, there we go. On the import side, you can call it anything you want. You can kind of set another name if you want to, and then that becomes an alias for it. But imports always go at the very top. It's the first thing that you do. So then that it's available to anything after that, right? You want to set a constant here, and it can be the same name or you can give it a new name. And then use the require keyword to set the file path for wherever that file is in your file structure. And then it knows where to go. And sometimes VS Code helps out with this because as you're typing, it's like showing you what the next available folders and files are, and you can make sure you're getting the right path while you're typing this in. So in this example here, I've got this same file that we were in before, and we had get full name. But I've decided for my purposes in this file, I want to use a shorter name. So I'm just doing get fn, and that's going to represent that. So down here, I can say I want to log this little phrase, name colon, and then have that full name be there. So I'm going to call my function, and then I just call it using that name, and I can use it directly just like that because it was the only thing that was exported from that file. So let's do an example of this where, we're going to have something defined in one file. We're going to export it from there directly as a default, and then we'll pull it in using whatever name we want and use it in another file. I'm going to come over here and show you the code that I've got. So there's this main file here that you can see, and I've already kind of done some npm install stuff here because I've got readline sync in here somewhere. Well, it's right there. Look at that. And I've got a couple of folders here. The first one we're going to look at is common, where I have several files that have, different types of information that I want to make available to my application. So they can be used from anywhere. We're going to use it from main. That's where we're going to kind of practice, looking at this. So if I go over to contact.js, I can see that I've got some information for an organization. It's called Front Org because we are a spy agency today, and we are going to have our, fake company that's out there that we're operating behind. So we have, the name, the address, email, phone, website of Acme Corporation. And we have the business hours, and then we have a little function that'll format the business hours exactly as we want them and kind of, loop through using a for in loop, all the key value pairs for that and make it look exactly how we want it. And in this case, we're only listing the ones that are, when we're open. So we're skipping Saturday. Got a little bit of logic in here for that. And then we have a function that's just to print the organization information. So we have this whole thing all, put out in a single template literal on multiple lines. And we list out a bunch of the information that's coming from here. And then we say, let's go get those business hours, the days that we're open, and put those in here. And all I really need, even though I've got a lot of things setting this up, I've got data here and a couple of objects, I've got a couple of functions. The only one I'm interested in using from elsewhere is print org info. So I can just do a default export in this case. I don't need to export multiple things. So right here, I'm going to say module.exports and then assign print org info to it. And it's important that this value be the exact name of what's in this file. Otherwise, it doesn't know what you're referring to. That value always needs to be the real name of it here. That cannot be an alias. It's on the other end that we're going to be able to set the alias. So now that we've done this print org info, I can go over to main and say, okay, I need to import that function, but I want to give it a different name. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to say const print Acme info. So I can be a little more specific. And then I'm going to require, and you'll notice I mentioned how VS Code helps you out here, right? As soon as I put / to show what my current directory is, it shows me all these, folders and stuff. So I'm just going to tab over to choose common, and then I'm going to do another /, and now it's giving me the files that are available. And In this case, I want the contact file, and then I'm just going to finish it with .js there. And now we have it available to us, but we have it under a different name, but that's okay because it's the export default. It's the only one that's coming in, so we know that it's going to point to what we want. So we can call it, and I can just say print Acme info. And let's node main. Okay, thank you for your interest in Acme. To learn more about our company, visit our website, www.acme.com, etc. Right? There, it looks like a completely, normal company. You have no idea that there's spies operating from behind this one. Okay, so we have successfully exported something under one name, under its original name, but then brought it in under another as the default export. That's how you do one item. It's going to be different for doing multiple items, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so now let's talk about multiple items. You can do that, but you need to set an object as the value of module.exports so that you can have key value pairs to say, here's what I want to be available in the other file, and this is what it's pointing to. And so essentially you can use the original name, or you can create a new key that is an alias for that, and you just do it as part of the object. And then just make sure the value points at one of the actual things in this file that you are trying to export. And of course with functions as a reference, not a call. So I've got an example here where I've got a file called formats.js, and in that I've got a way to format different pieces of information so that I can always do that consistently throughout my application. Say there's social security numbers, say there's phone numbers, right? I have functions for both of these. So in this one, I'm taking all three of those, sticking them in an array and joining it with a hyphen. That's straightforward. On this one, I have different, kind of some extra things. So I'm just using a template literal, and I'm saying, okay, put the area code in parentheses and then do the exchange with a hyphen and the line number. And that's the string I want you to return so that we always format it that way consistently. I need to export both of these. So for module.exports, I can't really point to one or the other. So instead, I set up a JavaScript object. Just like, just an object like we learned about yesterday, right? So we have this whole, the curly braces to enclose the key value pairs. And then format SSN, all I need to do there is what?
Just reference the name of the function.
Yeah, format SSN. I'm giving it the same name. I'm not trying to change the name with an alias. So format SSN is just pointing to the actual thing here, format SSN. Then I say, okay, in my other file, I would like to have a slightly different name for this. So I'm going to export it as format phone. But what do I need to actually point to?
Say that again. Format phone number.
Right. Okay. This is the thing that confuses people the most, is which one of these is supposed to be the key and which one's supposed to be the value. For this process, the key is always the thing that you're actually going to use in the other file when you reference this object that's being imported, right? So you need the key to be what you want to be in the other file. The value needs to be pointing. You're setting this as an alias for the original function that's defined here. So the values should be what's actually defined in this file that's being exported. So if you can keep that straight, you'll be in good shape. All right, so now remember this. We have format SSN and format phone, right? That's what's going to be available to us in the other file. Okay. So yeah, that's the alias. This is the original function. There we go. Okay. Let's talk about it on the other side, the import side. If you have an object with multiple keys, then you need an alias that represents the whole object. And then you can use dot notation to access the key, any key that you want from that. So in my other file, which we just saw, which was formats.js, I had two functions that I exported, right, in a single object. That means that formats here actually represents that entire object. So let's say that I wanted to go get you know, a phone number and I'm going to pass I'm going to pass something in, but I'm not showing that part. How would I actually call the function here? What would I put?
Anybody? Say that again. Formats dot whatever the key is.
Right. Formats.format phone. Because the original function defined was format phone number, but we exported it as format phone. So that means we have to call that here. That's the alias. But we have to call it as, you know, an extension of formats because it is a key in that object and this is an object. So same thing for social security number, we're going to say formats.format SSN, and that's how we call that method. And of course, to fit this on my slide, I'm not actually passing in the parts there. You'll notice there's no arguments, but you would normally do that. Okay. But that's the idea. So let's go take a look at some examples here. Let's go back and look at a different file now. So we took care of contact. What if we wanted to import some things from this file? We have round to dec, which is you know, rounding to a certain decimal place, and it allows us to say how many decimal places we want, and then it'll get that little factor we need of 10 to the whatever power and take care of getting us our decimal thing. Very handy little function, right? Get random number. We can say what's the max, what's the min, how many decimal places do you want? This is the very flexible get a random number thing. And we're actually using our first function to round it to a decimal number, which is you know, interesting, right? And then this third one is to, you know, format as title case, where we go through and capitalize anything that is you know, the first yeah, anything that is not one of these words, but every single thing would be title case. Yeah, everything would be capitalized, just the first letter. Okay, so I need an export object that has all three of these in it, and we're going to use aliases for two of them. So in this file, at the bottom, I will say module.exports, set it equal to an object. Okay, then I need to set my keys. What do I want to call these in the other file? Well, round to decimal, I'm going to keep that the same. So I'm just going to say round to decimal gets round to decimal, right? This pointing to this. But the other two, I'm going to give them slightly different names. So I'm going to say get rand number and point to get random number here. I just shortened it a little bit. And then this one, I'm going to say get title case instead of format as title case. Okay. So I now have the aliases I want to use in the other file. They're all going to be keys of this export object. So we'll have to use dot notation to get to them and call them. But these are the names we want to use, the names in green. So now we can go over to main and import them. So let's go ahead and import all of them. Second here. Right. So we're going to have a single import that's going to handle just referring to the object. And I'm just going to call it utils and name it after the file. That's a very common thing to do, but you could call it anything you want to, really. Doesn't matter because you're saying I want to go to the utils.js file, and so it doesn't really matter what you call it. But now that we have called it utils, that's what we need to use to reference each of these functions. So I've got some long decimal number here, and I would like to actually see what it is rounded to 3 decimal places. So I can log that to see how this works and go to utils dot round to dec and then give it the long decimal number and say I want it to go to 3 places. And VS Code is reminding us here when we hover what the original definition is of that file that's coming from the other module, right? Or of the function, I mean. So it's reminding us that this is going to accept a number and a number of decimals. That's the definition. So that's helpful because sometimes we might have something that has multiple parameters and we don't necessarily remember what order they're in. You can just kind of hover over it and it'll remind you. Okay, so we've done that. Let's run this. There we go, 43.625. So that number is now shortened into something that's a lot easier to read. Okay, let's print a random integer between 0 and 100. So the interesting thing about our get random number function that we defined in the other file is that it allows you to have optional, let's go back over and look at it, optional parameters. So yeah, I have a max and I can just give it max and it's going to assume that it starts at 0 and that you don't want any, decimal places. But we could always, change that and put those in and specify it. But in this case, we're not. We're just saying, I just want something from 0 to 100. And so we'll do that. And it's just going to give it and round it. And you'll notice we're also not using like floor or ceiling. We're just, rounding it. So we'll do that and run it. And we get 51. Okay. And if we run it again, we'll get a completely different number, probably. So notice here I used get rand number and not get random number because the key is it right here is get rand number. It just points to the original definition of get random number. And if we hover over this, it's actually giving it to you. It shows you the alias get rand number, but it still gives you the same definition that's coming from get random number. Okay, last one, we're going to actually use our readline sync. So you guys have already been using modules, whether you realize it or not. We import the readline sync library with require, and we've been just storing it in something called input most of the time, right? That's the same thing. It represents an object that has a whole lot of things that are available to us. The key that we have been using is question. That's the one we typically use, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to say let full name equal, and I think I'm going to name that differently. Let book title, how's that? Equal input dot question. And we'll say, what is one of your favorite books? And then we will log it, but we'll log it in title case so that no matter what the user gives us, it comes out properly. So I'm going to go to utils. I'm going to access the key get title case because that's how I exported it. And then I'll pass in that string, which I called book title. There we go. All right, let's run it. What is one of my favorite books? Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. Let's go with that. Okay. So it formatted it for us, and we have, capital P, capital B, capital D. The function worked as intended. I should have done something that had a the or an and or, whatever. That's okay. So that's the idea here. One more thing that I can do for you is to help you understand what's happening with this module.exports thing. It's not as much of a mystery as it seems like. This really is just a JavaScript object. So if I were to console log module.exports here, and let's run. So I'm going to node common slash, which one was that? That was utils, right? Yeah. There we go. We can see our object. We can see that we have 3 keys and they all point to these functions, round to decimal, get random number, and format as title case. But these are the actual keys we'll be referencing. We can do this from the other file as well. So let's say I come over here to main, and just after I have imported this, I can say, okay, let's look and see what that represents. Console.log utils, right? What's all represented by utils in this case. And What did I just do? Okay, there we go. And right here, we see it. It gives us the exact same thing, right? So the object that we're exporting is the same thing as the object we're importing. On the other hand, if we were to console log not input, print Acme info up here, just to see what's represented by that import. I'm gonna Control C out of that and do it again. There it is. I just didn't scroll up enough. Okay. We see it points directly to that function, right? Because we did a default export in that case from the contact file, where we just said, let module.exports just point directly to that. So just keep that in mind, that whether you're importing something as a single item or multiple items, you have to do it a little bit differently. And the thing that your module.exports represents is going to be different. This is pointing directly at the item. The other one is an object that has key value pairs to point at each item individually. Okay, who has questions about this stuff?
Yeah. Are there any other pre-saved modules we'll be using like readline sync?
Occasionally, and when we get to React, absolutely. React itself is a library.
I think that was the only question.
Okay. I would like to go ahead and take a break. I know it's early, but it's a good time to break. When we come back, I'm going to do a little demo for you of a Morse code translation thing and a little program I wrote. And then I'll talk a little bit about the studio for today, and then we'll go from there. I would like to do a demo for you to show you a little program, just inspire you, because you can write little programs anytime you want to practice these things. And now that you know how to do modules, it'll make it easier because you can split up your code into different parts. So I'm going to close all of these and let's go over to this Morse code directory here. And I have 3 files. I have funcs for functions. I have a practice file where we're just going to test out a bunch of our functions. And then I've got the translate file, which is where we're really going to like actually have a program we want to run. So let's take a look here at these functions. Now, at the very beginning, I have an object already created because you guys did not want me to live code this for you painstakingly, where we have every single letter and common punctuation and how to represent that as Morse code. So that's going to give us a start. We can make use of this map with the key value pairs to translate any phrase we want to. Okay, so we're going to write 3 functions. We're going to start by writing a function that just converts a single character. We give it a character, it gives us the Morse code. Then we're going to write a function that will make use of translate character to translate a whole word, 1 character at a time. And then we'll ultimately have a function that can translate a string of multiple words, and it'll make use of translate word to take care of that. And then we're going to need to export these as we go to test them, and we'll test them in that practice file before we go over and do the translate. So when you think through how to, write a little program and solve, you want to think about, what functions do I need to have? And this is how I decided to break it down. Let's just do it 1 step at a time in a way that, I break it down to its very smallest part, and then we kind of go from there. So the very first thing we need to write is the smallest one. We just need to say, let's just translate a single character. I'm going to say function translate character. I'll allow it to take some sort of character as an argument. So I'll put a parameter there. And all we need to do is return translated character, right? And so I'm just going to do that. Return Morse map And then we go to the object and we access it using either dot notation or bracket notation, right? But in this case, I have a variable that I want to use, right? So I'm going to need to use bracket notation. And I don't want to use quotes if I'm using a variable because I don't know what the actual key is. I do know, however, that I want to make sure that I'm checking it in uppercase. I need to make it case insensitive because all of my letters in here are uppercase. So I can say, okay, take the character that's passed into this function, make it uppercase, and then use that as the key to go to the map and look up what the translation is, and that'll be what's returned. Okay, very straightforward. Just go look up one character. But this is how it's done, where I'm making use of a variable as the key to look it up in there. I'm explaining this very slowly and carefully because you're going to need this for your graded assignment, these types of concepts. Okay, hint, hint. All right, so let's test it. First, I need to export it. I'm going to create my module.exports object here because I have 3 things ultimately that I'm going to be doing. We've only defined one of them for now. So I will just say, I'm just going to give it its original name. I'm just going to say, translate character. Okay, that'll be it for now. Let's come over to practice and try this out. So up here, I'm going to need to do my import. So I'm going to just, give it a name that represents all of them. And I'm just going to call it funcs. That's the name of the file. It's very straightforward. And I'll just say require funcs, right? It's in the same directory, so I can just do the / and it's right there. All right. I want to store a single character in a new variable, just something I can test with. So I'm going to say, let's test with the letter lowercase w. And then I can come here and I'm going to create a variable to store the character, and then I'll print these in a sentence. Okay. So I'm going to say let translated char be funcs dot translate char and pass in char. Okay. Which is, the one I defined right here. And so there again, I went to the object that's represented in the import, and then I used the key translate char because that's coming from here. It's that key right there. And that's how I call my function and pass in what's needed from here. And I could have called this anything. I could have said, character. It just happens that the parameter in the one file and the variable in this file are the same, but we could do it like this. Okay. And then I'll print a sentence that has both in it so we can test that out. So I'll just say in Morse code, the letter pair is, and then on the next line, I'll put translated here. Okay. I'm gonna add a little extra formatting in here for us. Okay. Let's give this a run. Just clear this. Okay. I'm going to node Morse code / practice.js. And I screwed up because I'd put char instead of character. Hey, look at that. That's what I get for changing my variable names on the fly. Okay, in Morse code, the letter W is, and it shows us the //. And it looks like I forgot to put my other single quote here. Let's run that again. Yeah, there we go. So the W that we originally provided is actually in the single quotes there, and it's //. Okay, so we've tested it. It works. We are correctly getting the value from the key for W by calling that function, and we're doing it in another file. All right. So let's come back over here. We'll go to the next step. We are going to now write a function that will translate an entire word with multiple characters. All right. So I'm going to say function, translate word, and we'll just pass in some sort of word. And so I'm going to do string building with this, right? We're going to need a translated word, but we're going to translate it character by character. So I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way with a regular for loop, but I have to start out with something to build on. So I'm just going to start with an empty string and say, let I equal 0, I is less than word dot length. So we can go character by character. And now I'm just going to look and see, yeah, I could add to the translated word, right? Translated word, and then use that additive assignment operator to concatenate on. And this is where I have to go get the translation with translate care and give it word at index I. And then I could just tack on a space because we always want a space between our Morse code characters. Otherwise they all run together, right? So we need to actually have a little bit of space there. Okay, so we can do that. The only thing is, what happens if we come across a character that's not in the map? We need to plan for that. So I'm actually going to just double check with, to uppercase. And a little shortcut for you, you can use the N keyword here to check to see if there is a key in an object. You can say, is this, word at index I to uppercase in the map? And that will actually allow you to check ahead of time before you try to go access something. So we're only going to add something to our translated word if that key is actually there. So then it'll do it. It'll go get it. We'll add a little space and we'll just keep building the string like that. And then when we're done with every single character in the word, we'll return the translated word. Okay. So now we need to export it just like we did this one. Translate word. We're just giving it the same name. And we can do the same thing here now. And we'll just practice to make sure this works. So it's always a good idea to test your code a little bit at a time as you're writing it. Make sure that one thing works before you move on to the next. All right, so we'll have the word specialty. Why not? And we'll say translated word. And we'll go to the funcs object that we represents our import, access the key, translate word, and then pass in our word specialty. And now we can have a sentence. It's going to look a lot like this, so I'm just going to copy this. And we're just going to say in Morse code, the word, and we can say word. There we go, is, and then we will get that translated word that we just did right here, and just put that as part of our sentence here. Okay, let's run it. Okay, so in Morse code, the word specialty is, and then we have, every single character logged out in Morse code because it looped through and did each one of them one at a time. All right. So the last part is, what if we had an entire phrase, right, with multiple words? Let's go do that. We'll write a function to take care of that. And it can, make use of our translate word without us having to do it character by character at this point, because we now have a smaller function that just takes care of that part. So translate all is what we're going to call this. And it'll have, some sort of phrase. So the first thing I'm going to do is make an array of this by splitting it out, because I need to be able to actually tell what are all the individual words, right? So I'll just call that phrase array to make it really obvious what this represents, that it's no longer a string that we're working with once we start working with this instead. And I'll just split it on spaces. So just basically go get every single word by separating them out based on spaces. And then I can do my string building and say translated phrase is going to start with an empty string. We're going to loop through And this is looping through an array, right? So we just go through phrase array, dot length. And we're going to look at it word by word. So we'll say translated phrase is equal to translate word. And we go to the phrase array and get the word that's at I. And then we just add a pipe and a space to separate each word. And that's going to make it clear, you know, what the individual words are. Have a little bit of extra space there. Okay. And then we return at the end the translated phrase. After we're done looping over it and building it. So again, we're making use of a function we already wrote. Gosh, keeps, there we go. We're making use here of a function we already wrote above to handle each word at a time. And it makes use of the translate character to handle each character at a time. And you might have noticed we're not having to worry about case sensitivity at this level or even at this level, other than the check we were doing right here to just check and make sure it's there. Because our translate character is ultimately what's translating every single character of every single word and every single phrase, which means we can just go get that value from care, you know, with care to uppercase here. And that took care of our case sensitivity when we were ready to actually do our building, our word building and our string building for the phrase. Okay, so before we can test this, we have to export it. So translate phrase. No, translate all. That's what we called it, right? Translate all. There we go. Okay. Yeah, translated phrase is something different altogether. Okay. So we'll come back over, nope, not that one, here, and test this out. Okay. I'm going to just create a phrase that we can work with. And I've strayed from my spy theme, my very weak spy theme, and I'm going into Star Trek apparently. So I'm going to say, damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a coder. Okay. So we can test this. And I'm going to do it the way I did before, where I actually translate the phrase and store it in a variable just for testing. Make it easier to put it into my template literal. Okay. Go to the funcs object that represents the entire export or import in this case. Translate all phrase. And now I can print my sentence, and it's going to be, you know, similar to the sentences from above. So, yeah, in Morse code, the phrase in single quotes is whatever the translated phrase is. All right, let's run it. There we go. In Morse code, the phrase, damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a coder, is. And you can see very clearly the individual words separated by those pipes, right? That helps us have some clarity and look, you know, looking at the entire phrase together. Okay. So that's good. That means we have tested everything. It works the way we're expecting. So we are done with our practice file. Now we need to go over and actually write a functioning program that's going to be interactive for a user. This is where it gets a lot more fun. All right. So I want to write an interactive program. I'm going to need to interact with a user. And I'm also going to need to make use of translate all, right? Because I want to be able to translate anything they give me. So I'll start by having input and require readline sync. And then I also go get funcs and require funcs from this same directory. And I'm going to add the JS just for clarity's sake here. Okay. And then I've created a little run program, which I am going to just run from here, but you may very well be running it from somewhere else. So it's good to, you know, put it in a function. And so I'm going to start with a little bit of introductory text to introduce the user to my application. So I'll say, enter text to translate to Morse code, or enter quit when you're done. So we're going to make it where they can just keep translating as much as they want, they want to. They can do it over and over again. So we'll continue asking them for text to translate until they say quit. Now, this is going to seem a little bit funny, but one of the ways that you can do this when you essentially are just saying, just keep looping, but I don't really have a variable I want you to check to see if we're supposed to keep looping, you can just say while true and just let it go. And then later use the break keyword to exit out. So this is a little shortcut. So we're going to do it this way. And I'm going to have phrase be whatever they give me, right? Input.question. And I'll just say enter text to translate into Morse code. Okay. Then I need to check and see if the text that they entered was quit or not, right? Because if they say quit, I need to break out. So we'll do that first. If phrase to uppercase is quit, then we'll say, it's a nice little, thing to say as they're leaving. Thanks for trying out the translator. Goodbye. Okay. Otherwise, oh, and we have to break, right? We have to actually exit the loop because I just did while true. So otherwise, this will be an infinite loop. We will never stop translating things. But if they didn't say quit, then this is where we're going to want to just log the translation. So we'll go to funcs, since that's how I imported this, and call translate all and pass in the phrase they gave us. Okay. And that's it. So, and now down here, I've called run program so that when I execute translate.js, it's going to just go ahead and run this program right here. And we should see all of that happening. So let's do it. I'm going to pull this up so we can see it. I'm going to clear it. All right. Let's node Morse code translate. All right. Enter text to translate Morse code or enter quit when you're done. So let's say the crow flies at midnight. It's a good spy phrase, right? It's kind of quintessential. Okay, there we go. And then it asks us again, translate into Morse code. So I could, wow, somebody give me a phrase, anything. My brain is out to lunch.
The Eagles landed.
Good one. The eagle has landed. Excellent. Yeah, okay. There we go. And now we have it in Morse code. Got one more?
What's that? The Bridge of Spies.
The Bridge of Spies. Okay, there we go. And now let's say I'm done. I want to quit. I can just type in quit. And because I checked for case sensitivity, it didn't matter that it wasn't in capitals, but it exited. It broke out and said, thanks for trying. Actually says, thanks for trying, not trying. So I would have to fix that. Thanks for trying out the translator. There we go. All right, so that is how that works. Does anybody have any questions for me about all of this?
I think we're good.
Okay, all right. Good. Yeah. So that was just to give you a little bit of an idea of what you can do with modules. You can write little programs like this and practice and do fun little things. I've actually written quite a lot of programs for practice since I was a LaunchCode student. I did it while I was a TA and was really messing around trying to get better at JavaScript, and things. So if you look on my website, you'll find where I've got like games. I've got a blackjack kind of clone and Yahtzee and a whole bunch of stuff like that, where you can go through and have these interactive games in a text version. Okay. I'm going to introduce your studio in a second, but to lead up to your studio, I wanted to give you a little bit of encouragement from my own story. Because here's the thing. You guys are going to discuss this idea of uh, imposter syndrome and boosting your confidence and all these kinds of things, because you may already, just a couple of weeks in, have gotten to a point in your head where more than once you have said, this is so hard. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm meant to be here. Like I don't belong here. And if you felt that way, that's normal. Um, it's going to happen again and again and again. So it's really good to kind of know how to work through that. When I was a student, so this was, I guess, like late 2019, I could tell that my class, like my fellow students, were just really stressed out. It was about halfway through unit 2, so they were further along. We were further along than you guys are now. But it's not too early to talk about this. But I was talking with the course manager about it, and he said, and I told him a little bit of my own story and just kind of how I got there and how I understood how everyone was feeling, but some things that I had learned from stuff I'd gone through in my past that had kind of helped me. And he said, would you want to give a talk to your peers like about this, so that everybody kind of understands that we're all going through the same thing. It's just good to know that you can commiserate with other people. And I said, sure. So I gave something like this talk, which is basically just, everyone they were feeling like I'm getting a little further behind. I'm stressed. They were kind of communicating these things. And he just kind of asked them, we did it in Slack at the time, and he just kind of put it out there and said, how are you feeling? Like, what kind of emotions are you going through? What kind of things, motivate you? Like, think about some of those things. And so people were talking about, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to remember everything I've learned. And as I get closer to doing liftoff and actually applying for a job, am I even going to be able to articulate and demonstrate all these things I've learned to, in an interview or, to other people who know more than I do? That's scary. Change itself is scary. Like, I've jumped into this thing and said, I'm going to go do this hard thing and completely change my career and change my life. That's there's a lot of unknowns there, and that's scary. But people also said things like, change can be exciting. It's really good to have a challenge. It's great to be able to learn, or to love. Sorry, it's really great to be able to learn new things, because I felt stuck before, and that was absolutely how I felt at the time. And a change is necessary. Maybe somebody was in a dead end job. Some people said it's just financial. Like I need to be trained in something where I can actually make a living for myself and my family. And some people said I'm doing it for my family just to be like a role model, like and show my kids that they can do this sort of thing. So people had a lot of good motivations, and you might have some that are completely different for you. So I shared a little bit of my story, and I'll share it with you, because everyone has a personal story. You have things that have shaped who you are and how you deal with things when they come up. So mine is that, and it's been 7 years ago now, it was 2017. I was about to apply for jobs. I was feeling very stuck in my career at the time. I was in the nonprofit sector and doing a lot of grant writing and database stuff with contributions and stuff like that. And I was feeling really stuck. There was really nowhere for me to grow and learn. So I had my resume polished up. My company didn't know this, of course. I had my resume polished up. I was about to apply for jobs. I had a list of jobs to apply to, and literally 2 days later, was diagnosed with cancer. And I was like, oh, like, well, I can't go get a new job now. But more importantly, I was diagnosed with cancer, and it was like serious, aggressive cancer. And so initially I was kind of surprised I didn't fall apart. Like I just kind of was like, okay, what do I need to do? Like, let's do it, right? And I was like, I've been through a lot in my life in the past. I don't know how hard this is going to be. I know it can be hard, but I can do it. Like, I just kind of had that mentality from the beginning. But of course, I didn't know everything I needed to know. So it did get really hard. And there were times that I was just like, oh my gosh, like I understand now why people say that they battle cancer. Like, this is hard. I was like halfway through chemo, and I was having this little conversation with myself on my way home from work because I still had to work full time. I had to support myself, which was hard. But I was thinking about it on the way home from work, and I was like, I don't want to fight this hard just to not die. Like, I want to fight this hard to live, and I need to decide what that's going to look like. What have I not been doing in my life that I would like to change? And it took a lot longer than I wanted it to be able to get to the point where I could do something about it. I had 7 surgeries. I had, so I had to get my physical strength back. And my job was very sedentary. And even while I was in LaunchCode, the classwork, everything was very sedentary. I was not nearly as strong then as I am now. But like, uh, the hardest part was the cognitive impairment that chemo does. They talk about it, chemo brain. There were days when I just couldn't even get from point A to point B in my head, like at all. And even after I was done, and for a long time, I still couldn't think quite right. I couldn't, and actually, I'm not 100%. You guys notice sometimes I have trouble with vocabulary retrieval. I'm like stopping and I'm trying to think of the word, or like today where I own every single Agatha Christie book about Poirot and Marple, and I still couldn't remember like a single title because I don't know, my chemo brain. I'm going to blame it on chemo brain. Anyway, for a long time, it was still pretty bad. And so that was a major blow to my confidence. It was very scary. I was worried that I was never going to be able to think well again. And so I was like, I think I have an idea about one of the things I want to do to make a major change in my life, which is to get into coding. But I don't know if I can do it. And it took about a year and a half after I finished chemo for me to finally start feeling like I wasn't constantly struggling to think. And that was just in time. I found out about LaunchCode, like right as I was realizing that. So it was perfect timing. But I realized that cancer had really changed me. Obviously there were some negative things, but there were a lot of positive things too. Like I don't take shit from anybody anymore. I advocate for myself really well. I handle conflict really well. Am better at overcoming social anxiety. There is no way that I could get up here and teach in front of you guys if I had not been able to figure that out. Like, because I do have social anxiety and I'm a hardcore introvert. It's exhausting to me to do these kinds of things, but I also love it. And to be able to do all of that, my whole journey through cancer kind of didn't give me a choice, but to have to deal with that on a regular basis, all of the different people I was constantly talking to, the appointments, the treatments. So it changed me for the better in a lot of ways. And that kind of gave me a lot of confidence then to be able to go and do something like this. And when I walked into that room that you guys are sitting in right now, I mean, it was an evening course. There were 250 people. I got there kind of late, not late, but like just on time, because I worked across town. And it was standing room only in the back. And it was a little bit overwhelming at first, but it was also awesome because the LaunchCode community is so great. So I was energized in a way that I didn't expect. But it doesn't mean that I didn't struggle. And so some of the things that I really came to terms with was that it was important for me to be honest with myself about how I was feeling, right? I needed to let myself like be in tune with myself to say, oh, I'm really stressed, or I'm having a hard time coping with this or with that. And I'm just uncomfortable with this learning curve. Learning curves are painful. But I have to push through, and I have to just embrace the fact that this is the way it's going to be for a little while, because this is growing pains, and it's only for a time, to do things on the intense level that you're doing it in this class right now. And another thing was just to remember that there are fears that you're going to feel, and some of them are legitimate. Other ones are lies. And either way, whether they're legitimate or lies, they can get in the way of you moving forward. So you have to recognize them and deal with them. Also to recognize that, you're making sacrifices, right? Everyone's making sacrifices on some level to make this course work right now. It's difficult to manage your whole life, but it is only for a short while. And you have to be very kind to yourself, set reasonable expectations, measured goals for where you are right now. Don't compare yourself to other people. Everybody's coming from a different starting point entering this class. And then, remember that who you were yesterday, whoever that was, that's not who you are today. It's not who you're becoming. You don't want to get hung up on the past. So when you start to doubt yourself, ask yourself, who do you want to be? Like, just be inspired by that person that you're becoming. And before you know it, you're really going to see those changes. So again, I mentioned some of these things on the very first day that we all met a couple weeks ago, which is just, support each other, take advantage of this community, both in person and online. Talk about things when it, family, friends, therapists, does not matter. Talk to people that you know are going to listen and give you good support. Just don't not talk about it. So ultimately, the most important thing is to talk to yourself, right? You need to remind yourself of what's true and good and what motivates you, and just kind of take a deep breath and keep holding on to those things and moving forward. And be proud of yourself. You already have learned so much, right? And you are going to continue learning so much. So you're going to get there. And it's going to be super exciting when you do. So yeah, that's I I found going through this whole process of as a student at LaunchCode, I constantly surprised myself in a good way, and it just kept giving me more motivation. I kept getting more excited, and I would work on extra practice problems and go look at this and try this out and try that out. So you can tap into those kinds of feelings to help you get through the times when you're banging your head against the wall, and you're frustrated and you're feeling discouraged, whatever it is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster, but if you can keep some of those things in mind, you're going to get through it. It's going to be all right. Okay, so that's all I had to say. All right, I do have some practice on my website. I have a little geometry practice, and then I do have that Morse code thing if you want to try that out there as well. And then again, just a reminder, I've got a couple of tutorials, bigger tutorials for graded assignment 2 to write some more complex programs that will help you practice a lot of the same skills that you need for a graded assignment 2. We have a work day tomorrow. We'll be introducing graded assignment 2 this afternoon after your studio, and that will be at 2:30, not at 3, because the studio will be shorter. And then tomorrow I'll do an instructor review session after lunch. Unit testing's on Thursday. You have a graded assignment workday on Friday. And then on Monday next week, we're going to talk about scope, type, and exceptions in chapters 15 through 17. They're all very short chapters, so don't be worried about that. They're super short. I think all 3 of them together are shorter than like some of the other chapters, single chapters you've done. Okay, so for studio today, boosting confidence, non-coding studio, no coding. You're just going to talk about it. You're going to hear from each other and learn from each other, and it's going to be good. I really enjoyed this studio, being able to talk with my fellow students about things. I felt inspired by them, some of the things that they said. So, all right.